Hey, good morning.
Good morning. We're back.
We're back. 2023. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it feels like it's been ages since we've done this actually. And I think the last one we posted was mid-December. So I guess
Yeah.
it's been almost a month.
Yeah, it does. It feels really long. And I think because you have so much going on during that time as well, it always feels like even longer, doesn't it? So it's
Yeah,
good to be back.
it is. It is to get back into the groove. It's fun.
Or not.
Or not.
Or not. Yeah.
It could be terrible. Who knows? We'll see.
Um, okay, cool. So I know we had a little chat before and we were talking about where this conversation might go, and we have very little idea, but our starting point was um how you are have decided to not jump straight back into work this year so far. So do you just want to share like where you're at with that, um, how you made that decision, how it's going?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I am taking January completely off, and that includes having finished my part-time job just before Christmas. So I think the Friday before Christmas was my last day at my part-time job, for good. It's done with. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, very relieved to be to for that to have finished, but also to have I decided that I ended last year very, very charged. In I could feel that I was in like fight or flight basically continuously. I was
Mm.
running on the edge of my nervous system. And not only was that incredibly stressful, but it just created this complete detachment from from almost this complete detachment from reality for me. Like I didn't feel as though I was really in any of my activities, any of my days. I wasn't in conversations fully. In the lead up towards Christmas, I was I couldn't even think of like gifts for any of my loved ones, which I'm always a last minute sort of gift giver or gift buyer. But usually I have all of these ideas or I have things, that sort of percolating throughout the year. But this year it was as though it wasn't happening. It was as though Christmas was not happening. And I was only focusing really on the end of my job and
Mm.
just getting like scratching my way through to the end of the year. That any kind of extra energy for other people, for gifts, for creativity was so far beyond my my means right then that
Yeah.
it was just not enjoyable. So at the point at which I gave my notice in at my job, I also started to think about what happens after that.
Mhm.
And as you know, through our coaching sessions,
Mhm.
as my partner knows through my stress every single day, immediately I was jumping into, okay, but what am I doing after? How am I going to make money after?
Yeah.
And then it was actually after our podcast episode where we spoke about money. And I said about how I had this like surprising little batch of savings. And I was like, oh, I have a little batch of savings. I could actually take some time off here. So which I've done. So I have
Mhm.
January allocated as a month to not even consider what I'm earning because the savings are there on purpose, or I wasn't purposefully doing it at the time, but thankfully past me is taking care of current me and there's money available. So I'm not thinking about money. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to earn money in February yet. And I'm just trying to take a real break, like a
Mm.
settle my nervous system, re-establish where I'm at, where I'm going. Well, I'm trying not even to think about that really, but just to be in my days fully and enjoying the things that I'm doing. And it is extremely confronting in many, many ways.
Oh.
It's
I think
there's every single morning I get up and I'm like, this, I have the actual thought of what am I going to do today?
mm,
Um, and all of these routines or all of these automatic tendencies that my body has gotten itself into over the last 30 years or whatever of working. Well, I was not working when I was 4 years old. 20 years of working have have just become ingrained. And every morning I'm like, okay, so what's the thing? What's the thing? What am I doing? And it's like my body wants to put itself to work, and I have to pull back and say, no, we're taking this time to reset. And it's really difficult, actually. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. But we are only 12 days into January. Probably half of the first week was spent in my pajamas after New Year anyway. So yeah, it's really only been a week.
yeah, beautiful. Okay. I think it's so interesting actually how what you're giving yourself right now is something that many of us say that we want, right? We want to wake up and just go, what do I want to do today, right? We see that as freedom.
Mm,
And yet, even though it's the thing that so many of us want, here you are having that experience and saying, this is actually really confronting.
yeah.
So I just think that's really interesting how we can really want something, we can have an idea about how it's going to be, and then the reality of that is actually quite different. How are you handling that right now? Are you handling that right now?
um at first, like, so when I was sort of at the first in the in between period before Christmas and New Year, me and my partner, and over New Year, me and my partner have a, a tradition of going away to like a cabin or something and just spending time, um, reassessing the last year, looking forward to the next year, and seeing where we're at both individually and as a couple. Which, and that time I really really cherish. It's a really
Yeah.
enjoyable time of the year. This year we just stayed at home because we've just moved to basically a cabin in the woods. So we thought we'll do it here. But it wasn't quite the same. I think it didn't
Mm,
take us out of reality of normal life enough to do it quite that much. But in that time I had all of these sort of um ideas or hopes maybe of things that I'll do, you know, things, creative ideas, or things that I'll try. Like there's a guitar here, so I could try and learn guitar. I could one of the my presents for Christmas was a jewelry making kit. So, I've got that available, although I need to go and buy gas and admin chores, which are a whole other story. But yeah, so there's this, I had this sort of this list in my mind of everything that I could potentially spend my time doing.
mm,
And what I found when I got to these days, when I got to the time, the first days when Jason left for work and I was here in the house on my own, was that it felt like I would be jumping back into something else. Like I would be jumping back into work, even though in theory it was, excuse me, it was an enjoyable activity, a creative and fun activity. That the way I would be doing it would be to fill time of production. It
mhm.
it felt as though it was an automatic response rather than either an inspired activity or a true desire to do those things. And I'm only now getting to the point, sort of a week, 7 days into doing this, that I'm feeling sort of the nudges to want to do things, instead of what am I going to fill my time with, how am I going to do this, what's the thing that I should do today. So it's really um, taken active time to detach from almost trying to fill production, even creative production. And I didn't want to just jump from one to the other.
Yeah, so easy to do. So easy to do. And then to kid yourself thinking that, Yeah, I definitely did it. I took the break.
Yeah.
Um, what's really interesting to me here is it sounds like this is a real conscious thing for you. This break is you're very aware of the fact that you needed this break, of what this break can be and what
Yeah.
it could be if you don't allow it to fully be what it can be.
Mm.
um, and I think that's really interesting because thinking about taking breaks from our work in general, I know that I've taken breaks, long breaks, particularly last year, that actually were not conscious, that were very unconscious. And I think there's something in that perhaps of like maybe the break is it can only really give you fully what you need if you go into it with that conscious awareness and you do the things, you question those like motivations to start the jewelry kit and that kind of thing. Hmm.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because, I was thinking about this episode and I was thinking about breaks, and I kind of felt an edge of an edge of shame because I was
Mm.
like, this was a break, although it is conscious, and now this is a break that I needed rather than, was choosing intentionally to take
Yeah.
um, sort of for myself in the year pre
Yeah.
breakdown.
Yeah.
Instead, we're struggling through it post breakdown. Um, and I was like, so does it really, is it a true conscious break if you get to the
Mm.
point when you need it rather than you're putting it in place intentionally? And I've kind of resolved that for myself by exactly what you're saying, the fact that, okay, yes, I did need the break. It wasn't conscious in the lead up. It was a sort of a physiological need, and yet how I'm choosing to spend the time is conscious and
Yeah.
does have healing in mind, um, and attention in mind. So I
Mm.
think there is it's there's a gray area there between how, like, at the point at which you realize, at the point at which it becomes quite conscious.
Mm.
um but I think both are important.
Yeah. Sounds like you caught it as early in the process as you could and you saw it and were able to see like, oh, let's bring this consciousness in, like even though I've been unconscious up to this point, like now I see it, now I'm gonna really be aware of how I spend my days. And
Mm.
I think that's beautiful because it feels like there's almost to me like many different flavors of taking a break from work, right? So there's on one side, there's this really conscious, like knowing you need it before it's like essential, knowing you need it before you just can't do anymore, and like planning that in and having that be part of your self-care and part of your productivity almost. Like, I know I need a break so that I can continue to operate at an effective level. Or there's this like, we get to the point where we literally have to stop and we
Yeah.
can't do anything else. And so it kind of feels like an enforced break. And then we get to, we choose how we then operate within that break. Um, to me, there feels like there's a third one because I spent almost like 9 months, I would say, in some form of break last year. And there are like many different experiences within that. A third one I'm really seeing is the procrastination break, which
Yeah.
I was in quite a lot last year. So I think that's an interesting one because what it sounds like to me is because you've managed to see, like, oh, this can be a conscious thing, like you've managed to catch it, there'll probably be like an awareness when it comes to its natural endpoint and it's time to get back in.
Mm.
And I think because I was unconscious in a lot of my break last year, like I missed those points, or I jumped back in too early, or I didn't jump back in when it was time to. And so it dragged out and out. And I mean, I wasn't fully off, like just for clarity, I just stopped marketing my business. I just stopped doing Instagram and all the things I was doing. I still coached my clients and did work behind the scenes, but I turned off that external piece of my business. So, and that was taking up a lot of time. So it felt like a big switch off.
And would you say that was conscious, like turning off that side?
Oh, yeah, that was definitely a conscious decision. And I think the plan was at the time was like, okay, let me consciously switch off this way I've been doing it, which is burning me out, which is not working. And the plan was, well, I'm going to regroup. I'm going to go back to basics and I'm going to find a way to run my business that isn't this. And I thought that that might take 8 weeks. And
It's funny how we think we know how much time something's going to take. I can already tell. I'm like, oh yeah, January, and then we're halfway through already, and I'm like, well, not sure it's going to take
we'll
then.
see. Yeah.
But yeah, we try to
Honestly,
put these time limits on it.
yeah, 8 weeks maximum. I thought 2 months. That felt like such a long amount of time to regroup. But as you say, like my nervous system was fried. I was still working, so I wasn't fully focused on it. It wasn't, something I could really give all my time to. And it's only been this like last 6 weeks perhaps that I feel like clearer on the business model, clearer on what that looks like in a way that's sustainable for me. So it took so much longer, but there definitely was a lot of procrastination within that as well. Like it wasn't just this like, oh, I knew that I couldn't do it like that any longer, and then I took the time I needed. It was like, no, I got really stuck in not
I,
knowing how to restart, I guess.
I think that's so, it's so understandable, and it's one of the
Oh.
pitfalls with taking a break that I was thinking about, because you
Hmm.
can lose your way. You
Yeah,
can take a break and then forget where you were and lose your
yeah,
confidence, lose the path.
yeah.
And that definitely happened with me as well. Like actually, probably a year or so ago when I first started the part-time job and let my business slide. And it's
Mm.
only now that I'm thinking, oh, what was that piece of myself that I left back on the road all the way back there? Like, can I
Yeah,
go and get her and just try and pick her back up again? Because yeah, it's so easy to lose that direction.
yeah, there really is. And this conversation's leading me to think about, I've had this conversation with a client this week about like the magic of tapping into our past selves, because a lot of the time I think there's so much focus on like your future self and like who you're becoming and what this wise older part of you can share with you about today. But so much of the work I end up doing personally and professionally is like about the the magic we can learn from our past selves and like what they have to teach us. And it came up because, you said somehow my past self was looking after my present self. And it's very comforting for me to think like that. It's really a comfort to know like our past selves could be looking out for our future selves, our present day selves. Like, and when I pull on that, it's so much nicer for me because when I think about future, and this is, I think, why I got so stuck in the break, in the elongated, unconscious, procrastinating break, is because it was all about the future. It was this questioning of like, what's it going to be like? How am I going to do this? What is this activity going to be? And actually, what's really been the shift for me is looking back and being like, what has worked before? What has not worked before? And like learning in this very grounded way. And I think it doesn't seem as exciting. Like it doesn't seem as um like tantalizing, I guess.
It's
But
aspirational, isn't it? The future self.
yeah, that's it, exactly. There's something exciting about that. But what it's giving me is like a groundedness. And I would always choose grounding over like aspiration. Feels a lot
Yeah,
more tangible and real.
absolutely. And there's also something in the fact that, like, very often we judge our current selves. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like looking back at, when you look at past photos of yourself and you're like, whoa, I judged myself so much then. And look how I looked. Like, I wasn't as big as I thought, or I wasn't as small as I thought, or I wasn't as
Yeah,
whatever the horrible voices in our minds say.
yeah,
When we look back, it was actually fine,
yeah.
and and we, mentally we do that as well. We're constantly judging our current self,
Mm,
constantly looking at the places where we may be lacking. And it's comforting to know that when we look back, we can say, oh, you were all right, you kind
yeah,
of had it going on.
yeah.
So yeah, it's something we can learn about how we think about ourselves now.
Mm, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And do you think this taking a break is going to become like a regular, like annual? So you mentioned, it was unconscious going into it this time. How does that shape what are you learning about that past experience for how you'll do things in the future?
I'm so intrigued by this because I think that idea of pre-breakdown
Mm,
breaks are very important. And I feel as though throughout a lot of my life up until this point, I've ran myself to the ground, and
mm,
then picked
yeah.
myself back up again, felt way better, reset, and then ran the fuel way down to empty over and over again. And I have previously not learned that that does not work, that it's not effective, that it's not enjoyable.
Mm,
Um, and I really don't want that to be the way that I move forward.
yeah.
And I think really the only way to do that is by taking breaks, even when you feel good. Maybe
Mm,
importantly, when you feel good. Like
yeah.
I'm I'm part of a membership at the moment, and the people who run it, they take two breaks in the year. They take one in late winter, so around about over mid December to late January,
Mm,
and then one in the height of summer as well in August. And so that's a full, I think, maybe, I don't think it's quite as much as 8 weeks. Maybe it's like between 4 and 6 or something like that. But a
yeah.
full 4 weeks at least off completely.
Mhm.
And that is very appealing to me.
Yeah, I love that.
What
That
do you
sounds
think?
so
Do you
good.
think it's something that you could happily employ? Or do you think there'd be resistance each time?
I'm not sure because this that cycle you were describing just then of like going, burning out and then like picking yourself back up again and like with renewed energy and then cycling back through. It was reminding me, I found recently this body typology stuff, and it turns out I'm this thyroid type body. And essentially, out of balance, that type does that on a daily basis, like uses sugar to bring themselves up and then crashes, and then uses sugar, caffeine, cigarettes. I don't smoke anymore, but I used to smoke a lot. And I so see myself in it. And I haven't, so since Monday, I haven't had any caffeine and I've had only sugar in fruit. And that might seem like really easy to some people, but I'm someone who was having a teaspoon of honey in every hot drink that I was having. And I'm having like 5 or 6 of those a day and craving chocolate and, other sugary things. So what I'm noticing is like life is just, I mean, I've had headaches and stuff as a result of the caffeine drop,
The
but
caffeine headaches are a
yeah,
nightmare. So
yeah.
frontal, like they're
Oh
just
yeah, it's horrible. But I have noticed like more of a steadiness through my day.
Mm.
And this is really interesting because it reminds me of the work I've done with my mind, right? My mind used to absolutely thrive on drama of the highs and the lows. And
Yeah.
through meditation and spiritual practice, I've been able to create less identification with those highs and lows, right? I've been able to remain more steady through my mind's activity. And initially, that felt like boring, right? Like there was an initial like addiction to the highs and lows. So I'm just wondering, because I'm thinking like macro, you know, would I look if I look at it over a year, like, is there an enjoyment? Like, is there a secret pleasure in for me in this burnout and renewal practice?
Yeah.
Um, So with that in mind, I think there probably would always be resistance potentially, at least for a little while, because like, for the first few months of doing maybe the first few years of doing the practices with the mind, there was resistance. This week, there's headaches, there's like, oh, I just want to have a coffee, or like I'm craving whatever it might be.
Mm.
Um, but if I can recognize that actually it feels good to be more in balance,
Mm.
like, and release that addiction to those highs and lows and the drama and the excitement that comes with it. Because let's be honest, right? There is something about it that we like. I mean,
Yeah.
for me at least, maybe not
Yeah.
everyone, but there's something that we like about it. So I think asking myself questions like that, it feels like it opens a whole can of worms.
Yeah. I know. I absolutely agree with you. Like there is something, and there must be something in that cycle. I must be getting something out of that cycle, or I would not have been in it for
Yeah.
so long. So
Mhm.
I can accept that. And I also, I'm also not necessarily. I don't think I need to so much go digging around in that can of worms and
Yeah,
examining every single worm and wondering who they are and why they're there.
yeah,
Um, it's just a case of, okay, though, that's a can of worms. I see it. Um,
yeah,
I'm not willing to engage with the can of worms anymore.
yeah,
So let's assess a better way. Um, and that to me feels as though um like it's the practice that I'm trying to employ now, is that rather than assessing the can of worms, which I is very tempting to, just dive
mm,
straight into that. Instead, it's more about um what feels really good about doing it a different way. um and how do I focus on that instead of, because even the assessment of the can of worms is like giving it credit,
mm,
it's giving it time, attention, and I'm not so sure that I need that anymore.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I think that it does bring up a lot, and it is a little unnerving to think, like, what am I getting out of this? What am I getting out of this cycle?
mm,
But I don't think we necessarily need to
mm,
know exactly what
yeah,
we're getting out of it. If we can just provide another alternative and get something out of something better,
mm.
that would be more appealing to me.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting our different approaches because I totally respect that. And yet for me, I get so much out of understanding it, like
Mm.
and delving into it and like questioning because as I've done that and like it has been challenging. And also it's not for a time when you are burnt out, right? Like that's just going to
Oh
burn
yeah.
you out even more. So I think it can only be done when you're sort of above your head's above water, really. But what I'm seeing is like, okay, like I was addicted to the high of the nicotine hit, the high of the sugar, the highs of the mind, the high of the cycle in business, the feast to the famine, right? Like I was you know, because all that stuff feels really good. Like the high of every cycle feels good.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting to be like, well, maybe the goal should stop being to like feel really good, because that has me chasing the high, that has me chasing the sugar, that has me, you know. And so, like, I think, yeah, I guess the goal becomes different, doesn't it? Which I think is what you were saying. Like, actually, the goal becomes for me balance. Like,
Mm,
what would feel balanced? Because when I ask myself what would feel good for someone with an addictive tendency, what would feel good is not always going to be good.
yeah.
So it's been interesting for me to see, like, and you know, we know as coaches, the questions you ask yourself are like so important. I spent a long time in my business asking what would feel good, what would feel good, what would feel good. Like it didn't lead to good things because sometimes what felt good was really destructive. So I'm changing that, like what would feel like balance, what would feel sustainable, even what would feel boring.
Yeah.
Because, you know, things that seem boring to me tend to be good things long term.
Yeah. Yeah, completely understand what you're saying, and I think um we're absolutely on the same page there. There's no, I think the my addiction is in the opposite. So I'm addicted to
Mm.
the to those massive crashes.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so yeah, it's, and there's again, we don't need to go into the can of worms, but yeah, so it's that really gritty,
Angsty.
angsty, like, you know, the real tortured artist kind of
Oh, yeah.
prototype. That's the part that
Yeah,
holds me in its grip. Um, and so
interesting.
actually what feels good to me truly is the boring stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and is just the okay, what doesn't feel activating
yeah,
feels good to me right now, or at least feels like good to be doing, not necessarily like
yeah.
good.
Oh, it's so interesting, isn't it? How like, because I could never imagine feeling like the other side of that coin. Like, I mean, I guess I must be addicted to both, right? Like we both are because we're in the
Yeah.
cycle, but it's like which part you put on a pedestal, like which part you value, which part you're
Yeah.
seeking in that cycle. And it's just so fascinating to me how we can be in the similar cycle and have a totally like opposing experience within that. Like I'm trying to escape those parts and you're finding the value in them. So yeah, fascinating. But I think this is the case, isn't it? Of like, it just shows that no matter what, like, it's not that one or the other of those things are the valuable thing. It's that the cycle itself is destructive. So let's
Yeah.
find that middle ground. Um, so yeah, it's interesting, and I'm having to with my business because I'm choosing this middle path of balance in my efforts in my business. I've had to look at it and go, I was wanting a lot from this business. I was wanting it to fulfill lots of different needs for me. And
Yeah.
now I'm choosing this middle balanced path, boring path. I realized I need things outside of my business to fulfill these other needs. So
Yeah.
it's been an interesting thing for me. Like, I've always been someone who I've never expected a partner to fulfill every need. I've always been able to see, like, my partner doesn't have to fulfill everything in me. But yet I was looking at my business in that way, being like, you have to be like my outlet for creative expression. You have to be my financer. You have to be the thing that I'm forever fascinated in. You have to be my soul mission. You
Yeah.
like, there's so many things that I could list that I wanted from this business.
Yeah.
And part of this balancing act for me has been like to go, what what one or two things are the purpose of this business in my life? And let
Mm.
me find other ways to meet those other needs. And that's been really, really helpful.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That sounds so it sounds so respectful, like both
Mm,
of you and the business. You know,
mhm.
like don't fulfill everything that I need. Don't
Yeah.
take everything from me either. You know, we can't
Yeah.
sustain that for each other.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? When I'm expecting the business to meet every need of mine, there's an equal and opposite force of me giving everything to it, like a toxic relationship. So as I've pulled back some of my energy and some of my time and my heart and like me and like reclaim some of that for myself, like there's had to be balance in the business. And um it's been a really good question to ask, like, what's one or two things that this business provides for me in my life? And what do I
Mm,
give in return? And without going too far into it, like the things I want from it are sustainability, right? Like regular income that's somewhat predictable. And so, in seeing this, like, I want regularity and predictability from you, business. So, let me meet you with a regularity too, right? Let me show up at the times I say I'm going to show up and work on you like I would work on a job that I was employed to do by someone else because I haven't always done that. So it's been really like, when I look at it that way, this 9 months of like questioning and not knowing and stuff has really led to something like very grounded and clear, which is nice to see. And I actually haven't probably acknowledged that fully until right now. So that's nice.
that's really nice. And I think that there's a risk, isn't there? There has to be an in between what we said about kind of that procrastination break, and then um almost looking back with these rose tinted glasses and being like, oh, but I gained everything that I have now from that time.
Yeah.
um and I think what you're talking about lead like is kind of the solution to that, you know, those regular, maybe shorter, maybe time specified breaks,
Yeah.
regularly placed throughout the year, throughout the week, or throughout the day, or however it makes sense for the individual. um to take that time so it doesn't all end up stacking up together. And if you go through a phase like both of us have done over recent years, where the time gets away from you and you get lost, there's a reassurance that you will come back. You will come back, you will return with more wisdom and with more confidence and with more grounding. um as long as as long as you are willing to be conscious within that, you know, conscious in the stages.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess in that way, like it really doesn't matter, I guess, whether the break is conscious, unconscious, procrastinating, any other flavor of break. Um, because it's probably exactly what you need at the time, right? And it's probably going to give you the answers you need. Like I know people who have taken breaks from their business and been like, actually, I don't want to run a business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and come to that realization, and that's the right thing for them. Um, and then equally, there's people like you and I who there's still that there's still that spark of energy for it there, like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of continuous, even if on the surface it's like I hate this, I don't want to do this anymore. um I think it's such a cliche, but there's really something about trust in this for me, like trusting the timing of things and trusting the timing of your life. And last year when I was in these breaks, there's been points where I really haven't known like what's happening or what's going to happen. It's been really challenging, but looking back in hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Like it's all been so necessary And you can always see that from the other side, can't you?
Yeah. Yeah. As I think there's I I really truly believe that we aren't machines that are made for this constant cycle. You know, these
Yeah.
there are breaks that are necessary, important. Like we cannot work our entire way through a year and live for 20 days of holiday that we can
Yeah.
just we can rest in. Like that's I don't believe that that's the way that humans operate best. um so I think we do need to structure in time. I know for me personally, uh I it's not healthy for me to um experience another nervous system breakdown as I did
Yeah.
it towards the end of last year. It's not good for me, it's not good for any of the people around me. So that indicates that I really need to change the way that I approach rest, taking care of myself, and breaks throughout my year in a more conscious way.
Yeah.
um, and at the same time, if one of those structured breaks evolves into a longer break or evolves into something, or we could do a whole other podcast on changing
Mm.
your mind and all those kinds of things, evolves into something different, that's okay. That's when trust is required.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And I think in this we haven't even spoken about permission, but I think just through the conversation, there's been this underlying thread of permission to take these breaks, whether they're unconscious, conscious, whether they're pre-breakdown, post-breakdown, whether you just need some time to procrastinate because you're not ready to make decisions right now.
Yeah.
Um, it's all okay. Like it doesn't mean anything about you. And I think that's one of the pitfalls I fell into last year of like making it mean something that it didn't mean.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, full permission to just allow these breaks to happen when they need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. And daily then within that rest is what I'm experiencing now. Daily permission to take a nap, or daily permission to um, get out. And the other day I had a few chores to run, things that I had to go out in the car to do. And there's this like crystal shop 10 minutes down the road that I haven't been to yet. And I drove to it, but as I was going there, it was a new place that I hadn't driven yet. I didn't know where the car parks were, I didn't know how busy things were going to be. And I thought it was going to be a really nice thing for me to do in that
Mm,
afternoon around those chores. But
mm,
as I was driving there, I felt my nervous system get activated
mm,
again, felt tense, agitated, really kind of questioning again, like, oh, where should I go? Blah, 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 blah. And then
mm,
I had to give myself permission to just drive past, to just say, that was a nice, restful thing that you were going
mhm.
to do alongside all of these chores, but it's not the right time. You have to give yourself permission to just drive past and continue down the road to Dunelm to go and buy whatever it was I had to buy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that had to. So it's like micro permissions as
Mm.
well.
I love that. Yeah. And it seems like there's something about activities that are nourishing I talk about it as like above zero and below zero. Like for me, the things that are good above zero, like yoga, going for a walk, cooking a nourishing meal, they are not good if I'm below zero. Like, and I think when you're below zero, you're like, oh, if I could just do some yoga, I just get myself out for a walk, I'll feel better. It's like actually, what are your below zero activities? Like for me, that is just laying quietly on my bed, giving, like might not
Yeah.
be able to even go for a walk. And I think that like that those two levels for me of questioning, like, am I below zero or above zero right now? And then
Yeah.
like knowing what those activities are that will get me back above zero so I can go for a walk or do yoga or whatever. It's been a really good thing to look at. Like sometimes maybe all I can do is sit quietly and like hold my own hand. Like who knows what that
Yeah.
might be. Lay
Yeah.
a glass, you know.
Absolutely. Or there's this one particular show on Disney Plus that I is it's just very good at calming me down because I
Mm.
love like crime shows, but this
Yeah.
one is not doesn't really have much like crime in it. It's just like a mystery that they have to solve in the day. And it's one of those shows where there's a new mystery each episode.
Oh, I
And I
love
just put it
that.
on and it just zones me out.
What
It
is
just
this called? I feel like we need to know.
well, this is the thing because it's also very interesting, and I'm not sure how scientifically accurate it is, but it's called Perception.
Oh,
And the
amazing.
main like investigator guy in it, who is the actor who played Will in Will and Grace, which I
Oh,
enjoy.
yeah.
But,
Hmm.
he's a schizophrenic, but has like a but he's also a neuroscientist or a professor of neuroscience or something. And so they talk about the
Amazing.
brain and they solve crimes. It's basically my ideal show.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolute dream. I used to love I can't remember what it's actually called, but the main character was Jessica Fletcher. What's it called? Murder She Wrote. And I
Oh yeah.
still, if one of those comes on, it's so just easy and gentle. So yeah, I love this. I love this.
Yeah. I go to my dad's once every Monday or as many Mondays as works. And we were watching the Endeavour series, which is Morse, Inspector Morse, when he was younger. But we've
Mhm.
finished that now. So now we've gone back to the original Inspector Morses, and each one of them's like 3 hours long. It comes up on on the widescreen TV in that tiny little box because it didn't fit. The cameras didn't film widescreen back in the day,
Oh,
and it's just so soothing. I love it.
yeah. Oh, so good. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you feel called to share today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I could talk about crime shows for a long time, but I'll leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your days this week, whatever you get up to.
Thank you, my love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.